The Browns 2025 schedule is here, and I tell you what, week 7 sure looks like a sweet spot for the Browns to hand things over to Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel. I'll explain coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. The Browns should keep Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel off the field for the first 6 weeks of the season. I take a look at the best and worst stretches of the Browns 2025 schedule, and I play the schedule game for the first time. I'll give you a record prediction for 2025. I do want to thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. Just hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And, of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discuss in the comment section. This is your team. So be part of the conversation every single day. And given the state of the Browns quarterback room, 4 different guys, open competition, sort of a random assortment of guys in this room that you're sort of trying to decide who's going to start, who's going to be the primary backup, so on and so forth. One of the first places my mind went when I looked at the Browns 2025 schedule as it dropped on Wednesday was, where's the sweet spot for a potential quarterback change? Where's the place that I think they could have to hand things over to one of these rookies? And I think I found it in week 7. Now, I'm going to throw the schedule up here. You've seen it. I've seen it. We've all reacted to it in its different forms in terms of what we think that how this thing could shake out. And I'll give you my first prediction with the schedule game coming up in the final segment of the show here. But there is a notable stretch to start this season that feels like it's going to be an absolute gauntlet. Back half of the schedule, which I'll get to, maybe not quite as daunting, but this opening stretch where you start off the year, week 1, Joe Burrow, and the Browns have had a pretty good history against Joe Burrow, not last year, but previously before that, where they seem to give him some trouble. And in week 1 especially, week 1s are fluky, man. Week 1s are unpredictable and guys aren't really playing their best. So that could be a chance to maybe steal one against somebody like Joe Burrow. And so that one's like the least daunting game of this entire opening stretch of the season. But you go from Cincinnati in week 1 to then 5 straight matchups against teams that were playoff teams just this past year. You got Baltimore at their place. You got the Packers at home. You got the Lions at their place. You got the Vikings in London. And then you get the Steelers, your arch rival, to round it out the first 6 weeks of the season. And that feels like the stretch of the year that is going to be maybe the most difficult. And so understanding that, I think this actually sets up perfectly for the Browns to make a quarterback change by week 7. I know it's a very jaded thought for me to have. I understand it's a very jaded perspective to have with just the schedule release being what we're talking about here. But you think about like the setting your rookie quarterbacks potentially up for success, whichever one of them would be. We'll pull that back up later, by the way. Whichever one of them would be first up to take the reins, right? But if you want to set them up for success, you want a veteran navigating that opening stretch. You want a veteran out there to handle what I think is the toughest stretch of the schedule, and then be able to pass the torch or the baton, if you will, to a rookie to see what they can do as the schedule gets a little less daunting moving ahead. And I understand, like we talk about all these things with the understanding that the schedule is a very fluid thing. Teams that we think are going to be good from last year to this year might not be as good as we're anticipating. That's kind of the beauty of the NFL, right? Year to year, things can be so wildly different. And that could be the case here with this schedule. Maybe there's a team I'm overlooking in the middle portion of the schedule that's going to end up being good next year. We'll see. But how I view it right now, sitting here on May 14th/15th, is that like that portion of the schedule is going to be difficult. And I don't know that you want to trot your rookie quarterback out there week 1 with this gauntlet coming up, in the aftermath of the Bengals game to start the season, and maybe put them in a less advantageous situation to succeed. Now, ultimately, listen, if Shedeur Sanders balls out and wins the job in training camp, you're not going to shy away from starting him week one if you think he's earned it. Same thing goes for Dylan Gabriel. If he balls out and earns the job week one and is the best quarterback in this group, you start him week one, you don't look back, and that's just that. And they're going to, get thrown to the wolves a little bit. They're going to sort of learn from trial by fire, and that's okay. In today's NFL, you can get away with that. But I do think like week 7 almost becomes, because I don't think either rookie is ultimately going to be starting week one. I think the Browns are going to slow play this to an extent. And I think part of that is selling to the locker room when the season begins. Hey, we got to be competitive. We're going to give ourselves the best chance to win. And the best chance to win is here's a veteran that's done it before, see what they can bring to the table and go from there. We've talked already about like one of those guys, Kenny Pickett or Joe Flacco, being the odd man out. But whichever one outlasts the other in training camp, I think, will be the starter. And I think they probably get that first 6 weeks to sort of figure things out. And this might work out perfectly too, where because that opening stretch is so tough, you might be at a spot going into week 7 where maybe you're sitting there with only like 2 wins or 3 wins and things aren't going well. And then you're all of a sudden like, you know what, let's make a change. Let's try to find a spark. Kevin Stefanski, it was around week 6, week 7, that he was getting a lot of questions last year about, Deshaun Watson and should you be making a change? And he kept saying he gives us the best chance to win. He could pull that same card this year and just kind of keep riding it out. And there's certainly some reason to think that could be the case if they are going to try to prove like, hey, we're going to stick with this veteran for as long as possible because we think they give us the best chance to win and we're trying to stay competitive, or if that's how they're at least trying to pitch it or sell it to everybody, I could see that. But at least the first 6 weeks makes sense to have that guy out there. And then week 7 sort of feels like the place where that transition could happen, or there's an opportunity for that transition to happen because the schedule maybe gets a little lighter there. And then you're kind of off and running from there, giving them a chance to learn on the fly as the starting quarterback of this team with a less daunting portion of your schedule in front of you. And like I said, I because you start off with some of these high stakes games against some of the better opponents on your schedule just in general, I do think it sort of sets up here for the Browns to it might perfectly time out with that being where it happens week 7 that you make the change, because again I think you're going to ride that rookie out for a little bit and see what they're bringing to the table. But there's no unlike last year where you had Deshaun Watson and this regime was trying to be right about that whole thing and make the trade worth it. You were committed to Deshaun, so you had to keep playing him. There is nothing like that this year. This group is just a bunch of sort of random names in a hat, and it's easier than ever to pivot to a different guy if one guy isn't cutting it. And so I think week 7 does feel like the spot where that could happen. It feels like the right spot for that to happen because I don't know if I want one of these rookie quarterbacks, again, unless they just absolutely ball out and they undeniably take the job. I don't know if I want one of those rookies starting in those first 6 weeks because that seems like it's going to be a tough road to hoe for the Cleveland Browns out of the gate here in 2025. We'll continue talking about the schedule. That is the toughest part of the schedule, I think, and we'll dissect it a little bit further coming up. What's the stretch that I think is the easiest, and how do we feel about the end of the season where there are some tougher opponents that also pop back up, and it could spell the story of the Cleveland Browns in terms of what draft position they have or how they finish out the year. We'll talk about all those things coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, it's never been better to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. What would it look like to combine live prop bets mid-game on based on how the action unfolds. FanDuel lets you do that by combining them into same game parlays for a chance to win even bigger. You can also bet on players who are showing up in the biggest moments. Jalen Brunson has been brilliant throughout the postseason. Tyrese Halliburton hit a game-winning shot against the Cavs in their series. That's now over, sadly, for us here in Cleveland. But you can do that as well. You can play the props. You can play the odds on specific games. The choice is yours. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Today's episode is brought to you by Epicor. Every team knows the value of hard work and taking pride in what you build and practicing every detail to get the best results. But no one player, no matter how amazing, can do it all alone. Working together makes getting the win easier. At Epicor, the all-stars are the hardworking manufacturers and distributors who create and deliver the things we all need, from aerospace to electrical to medical devices. Epicor ERP solutions are created by industry experts to help make every day easier. Seeing your whole supply chain is easier. Managing logistics is easier. Responding to price changes is also easier. From small businesses with big dreams to growing enterprises with a global vision, we'll equip you with the right tools to move forward, think ahead, and lead the way. Because as the clock ticks down, you need to make the most of every hardworking minute. Easier doesn't cut corners. Easier finds the lane. Discover your success at www.easierwithepicor.com. That's www.easierwithepicor.com. All right, so as I said, I do think that opening stretch, the first 6 games of the season, as I throw this back up here, is the toughest portion of the Browns 2025 schedule. Bengals, Ravens, Packers, Lions, Vikings, Steelers, 5 of those 6 teams, playoff teams last year. The Bengals, almost a playoff team. But with the Bengals, you're always getting a matchup with one of the best quarterbacks in the sport, obviously, and that's always the case in this division, it seems, because you got 2 of the best 5 quarterbacks in this league. 2 top 5 quarterbacks in this league in your division as is. Now, after that Steelers game in week 6 is where I think the schedule gets lighter and easier to manage. I think the sweet spot really is after the bye, where you get the Jets. Ravens is obviously tough anytime you play them. But then you get the Raiders, a team that's very much a rebuild. You get the 49ers, which I know people are still high in the 49ers. I think their win total in Vegas is still, on FanDuel, is still pretty high. And people think they're going to have a bounce back season, but they lost a lot. Like, they seem like they're very much in a state of transition right now. I don't know that it should just be assumed that they're going to bounce back. And then you get the Titans and a Bears team that I think they could take a step, but it's the Bears. You just never know. You could maybe lump the Patriots in there a week before the bye. I don't know that the Dolphins are going to be a crazy good. But like week 7 through really week 15 is the stretch where I feel like if the Browns are going to win, like that's going to make or break the Browns season, because you're like, they might, if they come out of the first 6 with, and I'm obviously assuming they're not going to be some team that's in playoff contention late in the year, but if they come somehow some way out of the first 6, like 3-3 or something like that, which will probably derail my plan, by the way, of starting a rookie by week 7. But if they come out of that first stretch like 3-3, that stretch from week 7 to week 15 is what's going to decide if the Browns will be showing up on the In the Hunt graphic in December or not. Like that's what it's going to come down to, because this is a stretch where you can accumulate some wins potentially. I'm not overly concerned with the Dolphins. I'm not overly concerned with the Patriots, even though Mike Vrabel's there, and I think they are taking strides in the right direction. You have Drake May, who looks like their franchise quarterback. I'm not overly concerned with the Jets, who are just the Jets. I'm not overly concerned with the Raiders. I'm not overly concerned with the 49ers. I'm not overly concerned with the Titans. And the Bears, I think, are just kind of a big question mark that should be good, but I think they have to still prove it for people to really buy into them. So that's going to be an interesting stretch of the season. I also think it's probably the easiest stretch of the season to navigate. You could come away with, between that Dolphins game and at least the Titans game in week 14, that feels like a stretch where you could come away with, I don't know, like 5 wins and feel pretty good about 4 or 5 wins potentially if things go really, really well for you. Like Patriots, maybe Dolphins, Jets, Raiders, if you win one of the 49ers and Titans games, like that's not bad. So that is the stretch that I think is the easiest for the Browns to navigate. And then we get to the end of the schedule where You have again the Bears to start things off, or really the Titans start things off in December. But the Bears in mid-December, the Bills, the Steelers, the Bengals on a game that's to be determined in terms of the time and the date. But, this is where if you're somebody who's hoping that the Browns at that point of the year are trying or are playing for draft positioning, well, hey, you got the Bills, Josh Allen coming to town. That's going to be one that people write in as a loss, I think now. Steelers, yes, at home, but always a tough opponent, division rival, obviously. What's their quarterback situation look like? Is Aaron Rodgers going to propel them and excel them into another level? We'll have to see. And then you get the Cincinnati Bengals, obviously, in there as the team to round it out, the team that you obviously played and faced to start the year, and you have that separation from week 1 to week 18 where you see that team. But it's so, I don't know, like I'm not here's another thing. If miraculously the Browns are somehow in the mix late in the year, you get 4 of your last 6 games at home. 49ers, Titans, Bills, Steelers, all at home in the later months of the season, November and December. That's kind of what, again, if you're a playoff contending team, I'm not saying the Browns are going to be that. I wouldn't put money on them being that. But if they find a way to be that and stay competitive and give themselves a chance, that is an advantageous schedule to have at that time of year. I also love that portion of the schedule for selfish reasons, because as I've made clear on this podcast, I am anti the NFL playing on Christmas. And so selfishly, I'm glad that the Browns aren't anywhere near Christmas, and that not only that, they don't go anywhere. There's no road games around Christmas for them. They're home the week leading into Christmas. They're home the week after Christmas against the Steelers. So I love that portion of the schedule. But I mean, listen, it's funny because we make such a big deal out of the schedule, obviously, and I think it's a fun exercise. I enjoy it. But we've known the opponents for a while, so we knew that the schedule had some tough teams on it. I talked last week about it being like a gauntlet of a schedule just in general, because there are a lot of there's a number of the top quarterbacks in this league. Part of that, again, is just because of the division that you play in. You're going to see Joe Burrow twice. You're going to see Lamar Jackson twice. You might end up seeing Aaron Rodgers twice this year if you think that he's got anything left in the tank. But you throw Josh Allen into the mix. You throw somebody like Tua potentially in the mix, who didn't play against the Browns last year. That is, I guess, the one thing with the Dolphins is, like, you got blown out by the Dolphins last year with Jacoby Brissett. Or no, not Jacoby Brissett, with Tyler Huntley, your former quarterback from earlier in the preseason. So there is a chance that, like, they could do that again, but you're envisioning the Browns offense is going to be a little bit better. I don't know. It's a tough schedule, but I do think that opening stretch is the most daunting portion of it. And I'll say this too. In some respects, maybe it's a good thing that you open the season with your toughest part of the schedule, because it's going to tell us a lot about this team pretty quickly. Like, we will find out, okay, what is this team, if it's Flacco, if it's Pickett, whoever starting, what is this team really going to bring to the table in terms of competitiveness against some of these better teams to right out of the gate. You're going to find out a lot about this team. You're going to realize or recognize what they are, who they are, if they're going to be better than we expected, if they're going to be worse than we expected, I think, based off of how those first 6 games go. If they come out of that stretch like 2-4, I think we're going to feel like, yeah, this is about what we expected. If they come out of that stretch 3-3 or 4-2 somehow miraculously, we might start feeling like, man, now that you get into the lighter portion of the schedule, all of a sudden, maybe there's a chance that they surprise some people and they stay in that playoff conversation. So that opening portion is, I said the middle of the schedule is where it's going to be like the make it or break it part of the schedule. I actually think the first portion of the schedule, those first 6 weeks, is what's going to make or break your season, because you're either going to come out of that with maybe a couple wins, and feel like, yeah, this is about what we expected, or you're going to come out of it and surprise people with more wins than they thought you would have, and then that sets up nicely for you to fill out your record in the middle of the schedule if things go right for you. So I think the first portion might be sort of the indicator of like who this team is. And then maybe that's what I meant to say. Then the middle portion will kind of be the, make it or break it the make it or break it stretch, where if you're going to be a playoff team, this is where you're either going to prove it against teams that you maybe should stack up better against or not. So always a fun exercise. We talk through these things, and I'll give you the next part of this coming up, because whenever the schedule comes out, we like to make our first ever predictions for what this team is going to be. We call it the schedule game, and we'll play it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. All right, so it's everybody's favorite game. It sweeps the nation this time of year. We're going to play the schedule game here coming up. But one thing we do need to talk about before we do it is the fact that the Browns do not have a single primetime game this year, which is somewhat shocking because I think, yes, like I understand why. The NFL is basically telling you they don't think this team is worth a damn in terms of putting them on national TV, which could be true. This could be another dreadful season for the Browns. Their win total in Vegas, like I've been saying, is like 5.5. Like, there's a really good chance that this just is a bad year. And if that's the case, then the NFL will be right about not putting him in primetime. But I thought they'd throw him a bone and give him at least one. That oftentimes happens anyway, because it used to be that you always got at least one. Like every team used to get a Thursday night game, but that changed obviously after Amazon took over the rights, because they wanted they wanted better games on their slate if they were going to have this relationship with the NFL, and so that's what they got. They got better games, better matchups, and less of the monotonous games that nobody cares about. And so that means the Browns aren't getting the respect to have a primetime game this year. I don't know that fans hate that. I think most fans, and maybe you can push back on this, like the routine of like the 1 o'clock starts. And there are two games that are after 1 o'clock: 4:25 Ravens in week 11, 4:05 in Vegas in week 12, 1 week later. And then of course the 9:35 start for the London game. And then there's the last game of the season, which is to be announced. So that one we don't know. And there always is a chance they could get flexed into something. I thought like the lure of Shedeur potentially playing late in the year might earn them one. Like, hey, if Shedeur's starting late in the season, maybe a cool storyline, Shedeur versus XYZ quarterback against the from the other team. That could kind of be a fun storyline. So I thought they'd throw him one. Didn't happen. No primetime games. Let me know if you like that, hate that. How do you feel about it? I like primetime games, so I think it's fun. And I would have preferred they had at least one. But I also understand what the NFL is saying here, and I think most people probably feel like that's just the par for the course in a year where the Browns aren't expected to be much of a threat in any way. So with that said, speaking of the Browns not being a threat in any way, do I think the Browns are going to surprise people and become a threat? We play the schedule game. We go game by game, making our predictions. This is not a final prediction. So do not use this against me down the road, because this is all in jest. It's all in good fun, because the schedule's out and you got to sort of have some fun with it. But let's be honest here. There's a lot of evaluating that has to go on with this team, quarterbacks especially. What's that group going to look like by the end of training camp? Who's going to emerge as the potential starter for this team? All those different things. So still so much to talk about in that regard before I give an official prediction for the season. But this one is all in good fun with the schedule coming out and breaking down who they play when and what it's going to look like. So I'm going to start off week 1. Bengals coming to town. Joe Burrow is obviously a tough test, but the Browns have had success against Joe Burrow before. Week 1s are very, very fluky. And you just never know if teams are going to come out playing really well. If it's going to be slow starts, the Bengals tend to get off to slower starts, and Burrow tends to get off to slower starts. And as teams kind of search that time of year to find their identities, I just think this is an opportunity for the Browns to maybe steal one and start the year, surprisingly for some, with a win. I'm giving them a win in week 1 against the Cincinnati Bengals, a team they've had success with in the past, and just maybe some early season struggles from the Bengals, which tends to be the case. They're pretty much every year under Zach Taylor, they have gotten off to very slow starts. So I'm saying the Browns start off with a bang. They get a win against the Bengals, and they have one under their belts to kick things off here. Week 2, Baltimore, still a fluky week, and that teams are still trying to figure themselves out. But I can't pick them to beat Lamar Jackson, the Ravens. He's had a lot of success against the Browns under Kevin Stefanski and just in general. I think that continues, and I think he gets the win at home. Lamar does, as the Browns fall now to 1-1. Green Bay is an interesting one, because I do think Green Bay is a good team. I don't know if I think Green Bay is a great team. And coming on the road to Cleveland, I think whichever veteran they choose has a chance to potentially, give you at least something to start the year, and there could be some energy around that guy. And so I'm gonna maybe shock some people here. I'm gonna give the Browns a win over the Packers. I maybe against my better judgment, but I like the idea that they always get one that they shouldn't, and this feels like a game that they could get that maybe they shouldn't. So I'm gonna say they start 2-1, which I think would be a start to the season that would surprise a lot of people. Don't get your hopes up. Don't get excited because the next three for me are all straight losses. In Detroit, that place is a tough place to play lately because they've been so damn good. I can't pick them against Detroit. They're just that good of a team right now under Dan Campbell. The Vikings in London, I think Minnesota comes out on top in that one in the rematch from 2017 when they played internationally. And then on the road in Pittsburgh, I think all three of those are losses. Pittsburgh Acrisure Stadium has been a house of horrors for the Browns over the years, and I'm going to assume that continues here. That brings us to week 7. Miami Dolphins, October 19th. This feels like a game that the Browns could sort of bounce back from a 3-game losing streak and potentially get one. I'm going to throw them a bone here and say that they get the win over the Miami Dolphins and get things back on track. And keep in mind, this is where I said you could get the switch to a rookie. You could get that rookie taking over week 7 after that opening stretch of tough games with a bunch of teams that were in the playoffs last year. Maybe you get that spark and it leads to a win over Miami to start this sort of next stretch of the schedule. The New England Patriots, even though they were bad last year, something about going up against Mike Vrabel, also something about just the Patriots in general have always seemed to give the Browns fits, even when they've been bad. We talked about it last year when Bailey Zappi signed with this team. Bailey Zappi beat the Browns in Cleveland at one point with the New England Patriots. So I don't like that one. I don't feel good about it. I'm going to say they lose that one, and they'll go into the bye week with a record of 3-5 at that juncture of the season. Bye week, another place where quarterback decisions could be being discussed and thought about. You could see another change. You could see the first change at that point if it doesn't happen earlier in the season. And you come out of that bye week, you get the New York Jets in New York. I don't know that I'm fearful necessarily of the Jets. But I also do think New York in general has a really solid team around them that is going to be baked. Their success is going to be largely baked in what can Justin Fields bring you and give you at the quarterback position. So I'm going to say that the Jets win and it's a loss for the Browns, but that's a game that for me, as we get closer to the season, especially could end up being like a 50-50 decision. And we'll maybe see if that one flips for me later. Then you get the Ravens in week 11. This is one of the later games. It's a 425 kick, sort of a weird one to have a 425 kick against Baltimore. But I'm giving that one to Baltimore again. They are the creme de la creme of the division. I can't pick against them, so I'm not going to. Week 12 at the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm giving the Browns a win here. I know they're traveling west. They struggled against Las Vegas last year in their place. That was the penalty game where Deshaun had a huge pass to Omar Cooper that got called back because of a hold. But I think they come out on top this time. That team is in rebuild. I know Pete Carroll's a great coach, but I still think that they aren't going to quite be there yet. And so I think that's a game the Browns can potentially win. Then you get to week 13, the San Francisco 49ers. This one's interesting because, again, I do think that the 49ers are going to be sort of in the state of flux next year. They lost a lot. They kind of, I think they're personally poised for a step back again as they transition in terms of trying to pay Brock Purdy and all these different things. I'm going to say they win that game. Why the heck not? Kevin Stefanski gets himself up for that one. It's one of these offensive minds in the game in Kyle Shanahan that he's compared to, and they find a way to win, and you got yourself a little 2-game winning streak all of a sudden. Let's make it 3. I'm going to say they beat the Tennessee Titans as well in week 14. They make it 3 straight wins, and all of a sudden, they're going to have Browns fans talking at 6-7 about being in the hunt in the playoffs as you get deeper into December, where you go on the road to Chicago, and this is where I think the stretch that's going to, like I said, maybe decide how the Browns kind of finish things out in terms of the season, where they end up in the draft order. I don't trust the Bears, but I still think the Bears are a better team and should be a better team, especially with Ben Johnson taking over as the coach there and maybe getting them more out of Caleb Williams. I think that could bode well for him. I'm going to say the Bears win that one at home. I'm not picking them to beat Buffalo. I could never. And then you get the Steelers week 17, which is interesting because you could have like a rookie on a rookie in terms of the quarterback situation here at this point in the season. I don't know that like the Browns have been on this lately. The Browns have been able to split with the Steelers and it's been fine. I don't know if I'm picking that next year though. I just feel like the Steelers are going to be good. I think the Browns are going to be searching for some answers there. So I'm going to say they lose both to Pittsburgh. And then you get to week 18. I'm going to round it out with another loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, who by that point in the year will have things figured out and will probably be in the mix for a playoff spot and trying to just kind of like eke their way in or whatever it's going to be, with Joe Burrow just balling out the same way he did last year to try to win an MVP award and will his team to the playoffs if he can. So even though you get the 3-game win streak in there, you end the season with 4 straight losses. And with that, I have the Browns finishing with a final record of 6-11 is what it would be by my count. And so there you have it. My first prediction, playing the schedule game with you here, for the Cleveland Browns in 2025, 6-11. How do you feel about it? Do you agree? Too high? Too low? Are you optimistic now that you've seen the schedule with the Cleveland Browns? You can let me know in the comment section here with the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, on Twitter at @SpenCito_. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and make Locked On Browns your first listen every day, because we do this podcast every day. We got all kinds of content for you. We'll have plenty more for you coming up as well to close out this week, but it is an exciting time of year with the schedule release, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it today. And I want to hear from you, your predictions for the Browns after this schedule was officially announced and we get a sense of where the Browns are going to be each and every single week next year. Let me know. And also make sure you continue to be in every day with the Locked On Podcast Network. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer with the Locked On Podcast Network. I'll talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See you.